Madrid-Barcelona, Celtic-Rangers, Argentina-Brazil, Bears-Packers, Bruins-Leafs, Lakers-Celtics. All historic and great rivalries, no doubt. But unfortunately, they can't match up to the most intense, toxic, and downright volatile rivalry in the world of sports.
This is a Dolan Beats production.
The 23-24 season was just another chapter in the venomous battle between a football club and the video assistant referee, which was clearly introduced to football for the sole purpose of driving a Wolves fan to the brink of insanity. Wolves are no stranger to the most boneheaded, unbelievable, and downright corrupt decisions at the hands of the PGMOL and their Mickey Mouse VAR system. And this season was obviously no different. And in honor of the literal club filing a complaint to the league and asking for VAR to be discontinued, I find it necessary to go back down memory lane and see how many times Wolves were actually screwed over this season, how many points it ended up costing them, and show why the club wants his computer banished to Azkaban. Now, enough wasting time, we have a lot to get through. First game of the season. Talk about a sign of things to come, because they wasted no time getting on their BS when VAR in their infinite wisdom judged that this was not a foul by Onana. You heard correctly, it is apparently legal to come and deliver a haymaker punch to the head of a striker while he's hitting the ball in the last minute of a game too, which it's so obviously a pen. Was the ref's brain still on preseason mode or something? And it's in the last minute of the game too. It's quite clear that this penalty would have made it 1-1 and ensured a point for Wolves. So that's already 1 point stolen from Wolves in one game into the season. But don't worry, the PGMOL immediately apologized post-game for somehow missing something everyone else on the planet saw. Who needs that point back when you have apologies for being inept? Wow, thank you! Surely they'll smarten up now and stop making mistakes at Wolves' expense in the future.
3 weeks later.
So, they have this thing about forgetting the rules they've literally made when refereeing a Wolves game. They put it in the rulebook for whatever reason that you cannot call a penalty against a team for handball if the ball ricochets off another body part first. We've seen it in real time last year between Liverpool and Arsenal when Gabriel didn't give away a clear handball because it hit his body first. Okay, so why doesn't that apply here? By this point in the game, Luton had already been handed an extra man thanks to a red card sponsored by Charmin Ultrasoft. And then they're still creating a whole load of nothing until the ball deflects off of João Gomez's body into his arm and it's a penalty? Why even write the rules if you're just gonna freestyle the calls based on what team it is? Luton wasn't doing a thing without that penalty in a 1-1 game, so I think it's safe to say that Wolves would have had 2 more points had there not been VAR in that situation. 1-1 game and Hwang has the ball after a corner. When the Newcastle player, I don't even know who it was. That's how steamy my head was when this happened. But that player, whoever it is, throws his body in, has Hwang is swinging at the ball, throws himself to the ground and wins the penalty. I'm like, alright, fair enough. You bought a cheap one. But the only problem is he doesn't actually get touched! Evidently, Hwang possesses some Star Wars Jedi levels of force here, as he's able to send this grown man crumbling to the ground without even touching him. Never mind the fact that it was so obviously being bought with the way he stuck his leg in and tried to fall into the leg of Hwang. It was such a bad decision that the PGMOL sent referee Anthony Taylor down to the second tier as punishment for being a bozo, basically. So it's like they know they screwed over Wolves, and he said, hey, go spend a week in a lower tier and think about what you've done or something. But where are the reparations for Wolves? You know what they get as a reward? They make the same mistake a week later at the expense of the exact same team. You can't look at this series of events and tell me this is not a social experiment on the mental fortitude of football fans. How do you make the same mistake again against the same team? So let me get this straight. They're gonna make a horrendous call and make a big display of punishing that ref, only to let them make an identical mistake 7 days later? What drugs were they on in that VAR room to see this incident with the knowledge of what happened last week fresh in their minds and say, you know what? That's a pen! Again! He hasn't even tried to get the ball. He's just thrown himself to the ground and gotten the decision. Am I feeling a strong sense of deja vu? Is that just me? This one was even worse because it was the last second of a 1-1 game and directly led to a penalty that caused Wolves to lose. So that's 2 more points you can add to the tally. What is that, 5 now that they've lost? After a whole 2 weeks of peace, VAR and the PGMOL are back with their foot on Wolves' neck here in what I think is the holy grail of VAR ineptitude. Semedo has very obviously won the ball here and gets absolutely nothing of the Fulham attacker, but that's me using common sense and my own 2 eyeballs, which are not allowed to do at Stockley Park. How is this not a clear error from the referee? VAR loves to step in and disallow goals for a toenail being offside, but this isn't clear and obvious enough for them to intervene. So Willian gets to score a penalty and go up 2-1. Typical, Wolves getting hoed again. What else is new? On to the next game. But oh, wait a minute. In the same game, matter of fact, it was like under 20 minutes later, we see some elite mental gymnastics to cook Wolves once again. Because the initial penalty wasn't enough apparently. They haven't sent off a player because of a quote, soft headbutt. What exactly is a soft headbutt? A headbutt is a headbutt and a headbutt is a red card. I mean, am I the only one that's confused here? A soft headbutt, you know. How about a DM goes in and softly puts his studs into an attacker's knee ligaments, and you tell me if they get away with that because of the level of force? My bad, I didn't know that every headbutt had to be a Zidane to warrant a red card. You just learn new things every day as a Wolves fan, don't you? We're still in the same game, by the way, but miraculously, Wolves get a decision for the obvious foul on Hwang for a penalty. But they still manage to screw Wolves over by not giving Tim Ream a yellow card when he was already booked in the game. You mean to tell me he so obviously dragged an attacker down who's about to have a clear-cut chance, and it's not even a yellow card? It's usually a straight red. For those of you counting at home, that's now 2 Fulham players that should have been sent off the field with red cards by now in this game. And believe it or not, we are still in the same game when Fulham is awarded a stoppage time penalty in a 2-2 game. So just to recap, over the last 30 minutes of play, VAR refused to step in for a clear error on the first penalty, and then chatted nonsense about soft headbutts, but have now awoken from their eternal slumber to award a soft penalty that the ref on the field didn't even give. Have they no heart? You don't think Wolves have been through enough in this game already? Was it really necessary to step in here? You can argue there's contact if you want, but it's still soft, and it's just made even worse because it's the 3rd major decision against Wolves, and of course now it's the time VAR wants to step in. I think it's safe to say that Wolves probably would have won this game without this generational display from the ref and VAR. I mean, it took 4 pathetic decisions and a stoppage time penalty for Fulham to get the 3-2 win. You know what? I don't care. I'm counting it as 3 points robbed. Argue it with a wall, bringing the tally up to 8 points stolen from Wolves on the season. So remember all the way back in week 1 when they apologized for missing Onana's punch to the head on a Wolves attacker? Wouldn't it be so funny if the exact same thing happened again? Like the exact same scenario that they apologized for? Oh, would you look at that? It happened again and they didn't correct their admitted mistake. I mean, to be fair, they said they were sorry. They didn't say they were going to do better. I just don't understand it personally. Like, people will say the ball is gone, but does that mean you can deliver early onset CTE to an attacker because he's already headed the ball? What kind of logic is that? Hypothetically, if a player passes the ball already and then gets 2-footed, do they still get the foul? Yes. So what's the difference here? It's not even a fundamental issue because everyone sees this call get made a million times, just not for Wolves. Nah, instead they're not going to call it, admit they were wrong not to call it, and then not call it again at the very next opportunity. And it's another episode of made-up rules against Wolverhampton Wanderers with a subjective offside ruling out a late equalizer. Yeah. So I feel like I'm being gaslit by this league because what the hell does subjective offside mean? What about an offside is subjective? When do you ever see them call a ref over to the monitor for an offside? Never, because it's not a subjective thing. You're either offside or you're not. Let me make the scenario even stupider. How about I told you this call is coming off a corner kick and the subjectively offside player never comes remotely close to playing the ball? So essentially, they're saying Tawanda Sharewa is standing offside here and is impeding the goalkeeper's ability to make the save, even though he was nowhere near where Kilman scored the goal and nowhere near where Fabianski was standing. To make matters even worse, just watch any other team and how they approach corner kicks. So it's okay for everyone else to put half their team on the goalkeeper and try to block him off and like physically assault him basically. But Wolves can't stand 3 feet away from the keeper. You're impeding him if you do that. Like, this is an offside player directly impeding the keeper, and it's not even looked at. But Chirewa is standing nowhere near Fabianski, and he's impeding him. Okay, sure. This is also a last-second equalizer, so it's just another point robbed. What are we even at now? Like 9? I can't even remember. How about we get one of these last-second calls in our favor, huh, VAR? Wouldn't that be so quirky for you to switch it up like that?
I guess not.
11. This is the 11th incident. Really? Bruv, I'm exasperated by this point. I can't even muster up the energy to speak about this one because there is a lot to be said. But unfortunately, this is at the point in the season where you just stop caring. It's a long season and you expect me to still be riled up about reffing decisions? This has been happening all year. What else is new? Like, we're a charger to the game at this point. Just keep it pushing. But for the sake of this video, I need to try and explain what the hell transpired here. Wolves are down 1-0. And then create a nice overload on the right hand side, whip it into Hwang, who scores a beautiful header. And then VAR comes up to check the goal and everyone is immediately confused. Listen, if the crowd, commentators, and hell, even the players are confused about what's being reviewed, then your case for reviewing it is probably not that strong to begin with. Like, no one is even close to being offside, and there was no foul. Or so you'd think. Because despite 0 Bournemouth players complaining, including the one who actually got hit by Cunha in the build-up, they still felt it was necessary to disallow the goal when the alleged foul had 0 impact on the game and the goal being scored. Whatever, man. That's another point robbed, but who cares anymore? Bonus round, I forgot I didn't even mention the biggest game of the season. FA Cup quarterfinal, and in the midst of Wolves choking away a big lead to an inferior opponent, was a quite clear handball in one of the goals. It's like a disease, it's spreading to other competitions too. What, is VAR gonna start infiltrating our preseason tournament in the USA next? Even without counting the FA Cup debacle, that's 11 separate and unique times the referee, PGMOL, and VAR screwed Wolverhampton over in a season. How do you expect fans to not think there's some hidden agenda against the club? Like, I understand 1 or 2 mistakes, but 11? I hate how people say, oh, it'll balance out over the season, stop complaining. Like, yeah, maybe for your team it will, but I just watched my club get symbolically curb stomped for a whole season. 11 times? Really? And these are just the blatantly obvious, disgraceful calls. There's still several dozen more just overall bad and wrong calls that went against Wolves, and not enough calls in their favor to even come close to balancing it out. So in all, the decisions cost Wolves about 10 to 12 almost guaranteed points. These stolen points would have landed the club on like 56 to 58 points and 9th in the table, without factoring in that they would have had more fight in the last few weeks if they were still in with a chance for Europe, had those points not been robbed. The difference between finishing in about 9th and 14th was VAR for Wolves. That's some elite hating from VAR on their biggest rival Wolves, if you ask me. I think VAR is something that should stay in the game since we have the technology, so why not use it, right? But the way they use it and the complete corruption and incompetence of the referees that run the system need to go. And if they won't change that, then I'd just rather not have VAR. You can't really blame Wolves for wanting to get rid of it after going through all this, though. Like, goddamn. And you know the funniest part about it all? It's only gonna get worse next year. Like, now that they've publicly called them out, you think they weren't getting any favors before that? Watch this space. We'll be back here next year explaining why Wolves got hoed out of 22 points from VAR and the referees. The never-ending rivalry continues. Keep Wolves fans in your prayers, people.